If you don't mount a lens on your camera body, you typically take a body cap. Here I have my Sony a7R Mark IV, and here is the corresponding body cap for Sony E-mount. But instead of using this, you can also use this. And this is the UFO lens, and it's from 7Artisans, and its focal length is 18mm, 4 APS-C sensors. The full frame equivalent is about 27mm, and it has a fixed aperture of 6.3. Now, why am I looking into that lens? Because people who follow me on my channel, they know that I typically look into gear in, let's say, the higher price segments. But friendly people from PERGEAR asked me if I would like to review the lens. I said immediately yes, because this is the cheapest lens I ever had in my hands, I ever mounted on a camera body. It's priced for $69, and I can tell you already right now that I'm super surprised about the results. I think what we will do now is we'll look into the specs of the lens. I will share my first thoughts and impressions about the lens. We'll clearly mount it on the A7R Mark IV, and then we look, of course, into sample images and come to conclusions about this tiny little UFO lens, which is the same size as a body cap. Now let's kick off the video. When PERGEAR asked me if I would be interested to review that lens, my first thought was, let's check out the specs. Let's see what I can expect for $69. And looking into the spec sheet, it's quite astonishing what you find. First of all, and repeating myself, of course, we have 18mm on the crop sensor, APS-C, fixed aperture 6.3, so you shoot in aperture priority, or in fully manual mode, but only with two free parameters, ISO and shutter speed. And the optical construction of that lens, which looks like a body cap with a tiny little hole in the middle, is quite complex. It's 4 groups and 6 elements, so there is some optical stuff going on here in that lens, which is quite impressive for that price tag. The minimum focusing distance is 0.35 meters, and the field of view in terms of angle is 74 degrees. The weight is 49 grams. So this will not add a lot of additional burden to a camera body here. And it's constructed for Sony E mount, EOS-M mount, Fuji X mount and Micro Four Thirds. The build quality of the lens is really good. So if you look at that, this is a full metal construction. There is absolutely nothing to complain about when it comes to build quality. I also like that matte black finish. I think it's a beautifully built lens, and as you will see in a moment, it also looks really good on that Sony camera body. So let's remove here the body cap. Let's get this off. Let's get here this one off too. And then you find here a little red dot, and that red dot will fit the white dot you have on the camera mount. So let's get this on. And then now listen to that click. That's something I always like if the construction is in a way that it sits firmly when you mount it. Listen. Very good. I think that is again confirming the solid construction and the build quality of that $69 lens. Now if I switch this on here, I see immediately the vignetting in the LCD display, and that's of course because the lens is an APS-C lens, or for APS-C crop sensors, and we have here a full frame sensor. So the way to fix this is to go into the menu, and what many people typically do is they have APS-C Super 35mm set to auto. But that doesn't help here, the vignetting will not go away, just have a look. And the reason is that there is no electronic contact or information exchange between that UFO lens and the Sony camera body. So you cannot rely on auto here, you actually have to go to on for APS-C, and then the vignetting will be gone. Here we go, and now we have a full image here. What you see immediately here, it's actually now a 26 megapixel resolution, which is still plenty. That's what you typically have on Fuji X cameras in the APS-C world. You also see that you have here an f-dash because again, there are no electronic contacts between the lens and the camera body. So there will be no 6.3 appearing as the aperture in your metadata. And what you also see is the focus peaking kicking in. And that lens is, as long as you keep the minimum focus distance of 0.35 meter, will always be in focus and sharp. There is nothing to focus here, nothing to tweak. The aperture is fixed, the focus is fixed, and it's always focusing at infinity. And the depth of field is large enough based on that 6.3 aperture that as long as you are, keeping that minimum distance of 35 centimeters, you're good to go and things will be in focus. So if I take the shot here, I will look into sample images in a moment in Lightroom. And the only thing I want to say before we switch into sample images is if you look at that construction, is quite nice. This is probably the least intrusive setup you can have on a camera. It's a very flat lens because it's a body cap lens or UFO lens, and it actually looks quite nice on my Sony a7R Mark IV. I like it. So before I have this body cap on, I would always rather prefer to have this one on. It's still perfectly protecting the sensor, but in case you need a quick shot, point and shoot, the camera will always be ready to take the shot. And clearly there are situations thinkable where you actually will appreciate having a quick shot immediately in a point and shoot mentality. Of course, it's taking away the main value proposition of this type of professional cameras, because typically you want to play with your depth of field, you want to tweak the aperture, open it widely or stop it down, whatever depth of field you want to achieve. And that is not possible with that tiny little UFO lens. But if you want to have an image which is sharp corner to corner, you want to quickly take the shot, maybe in a street photography situation, or because you were not prepared to mount a lens and you typically have your body cap and this time you have this tiny little UFO lens on your camera body, then this is actually meeting the purpose of the lens. And it's a situation where you might be grateful that you have not your body cap, but this tiny little 7Artisans lens on your camera body. What you still can manually influence, of course, is your ISO and your shutter speed. And what's also still in place is the in-body image stabilization of that Sony sensor. So you can actually take long exposures handhold, and that is all in place. All the good stuff, all the features, intervalometer, time lapses, what have you, that will all work with this UFO lens. Looking now into a few sample images, you always have here a little bit of vignetting in the corners. We'll see this better in another image. But in general, the performance of the lens did really surprise me. And I think if you zoom in here to, I don't know what that is it 100%? Yes. You actually get quite sharp representation of the scene in front of you. And I think also the way the colors are rendered, that's really the way I was seeing the scene in front of me with my naked eyes. And it looks pretty good. Here's another example. It was a bit hazy at the horizon. You see here the mountains in the background, but the detail in the forest, everything that looks really good. And I like what I'm seeing here. Here's another scene, and this was taken at the evening hours. And you see here again at the horizon, the mountains are crisp and sharp. You could tweak this further in post-processing if you wanted, but it looks good. What I found is that I go to the corners of the lens in the same way as you see some vignetting kicking in, which I will show better in a different image. You see that it's getting a bit blurry in the corners and at the boundaries of the image. In the middle, it's quite sharp. If we look into the middle here, so let's go back. That looks good, but in the corners you lose some clarity and sharpness. And that is something you have to live with that tiny little UFO lens here. Going to the next image, I like that one actually even more than the one I just showed. Again, the representation of the mountains, quite nice. In the corners again, a little bit of blurriness. Here we lose sharpness. You see this also here at these trees. So that is something which is coming with that lens. Here again, you see the vignetting in the corners, and clearly you can fix that. Here's another image, quite sharp again in the middle. Very good representation of sharpness and clarity. And going to the next one, I think I skipped them here. Again here, you can read these signs very well. It is quite sharp and has all the details it needs to have, but it's located in the center of the lens, not so much at the boundaries or the corners. Here you see the vignetting. So this is the vignetting coming in at the borders, and it's a little bit reminding me in pinhole lenses. What I see here, of course, this is not a pinhole lens, but it's reminding me in the effect you typically get when you go for this type of photography. But clearly with one click in Lightroom, the vignetting is gone. So look at the difference of these two images. You can easily fix that. There is absolutely no problem with this vignetting here. Another image here, I think also good representation of colors, very natural. And here some details. I just scroll through them now. I don't think we have to make this artificially long. Here again the vignetting in the image as it came out of the camera, then fixed in post-processing. If you focus on the borders and the corners, you will see that. So quite nice. You can just fix it with one click. I think that's it. That's all I wanted to show here. And I hope you liked that little video. It's a big contrast to my last video where I reviewed the brand new Leica Noctilux 50mm f1.2. Clearly this is a super expensive lens, a very exclusive lens. In contrast here, we have a $69 lens, but you can take nice photos with that lens. And I think for $69 is a really good value proposition. If you liked that video, don't forget to drop me a thumbs up. Stay tuned on my channel. There's always more to come. Thanks for watching and peace out.